This week, we welcome Matt Radolec, Senior Director, Incident Response and Cloud Operations at Varonis, to discuss It's All About the Data, Understanding Your Blast Radius to Reduce Risk. In the Leadership and Communication section, do you really need a CISO? A CISO employment contract may mean the difference between success and jail. When your employees tell you they're burned out, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
Files are the lifeblood of business, and your employees will open the files they need to do their jobs, whether they're safe or not. With Votiro, your employees will only open files that are safe. Votiro applies zero trust principles to files and sanitizes every incoming file for your organization. Known and unknown threats are removed instantly, and the file retains full functionality, so your business is safe and productivity never slows down. And it's not just for email. The Votiro Cloud API works on web downloads, file uploads, cloud apps, FTP, and content collaboration portals. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Votiro. According to the 2022 Data Breach Investigations Report, the human remains the #1 driver of breaches today, demonstrating that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical challenge, but a human one as well. But how do you manage the human risks of cybersecurity? It starts with measurement. Only by effectively quantifying human risk can organizations engage employees with relevant activities to truly change human behavior. That's human risk management. Map key human behaviors to the business risks that matter most to your organization for free by visiting securityweekly.com/living security. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 307, recorded May 22nd, 2023. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me first from studio, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
It's good to be back in the studio, Matt. I was able to raid the humidor, got myself a little cigar. It's good. Not celebrating my Celtics, though, because they're blowing it.
Yeah, you in Boston sports these days. Just find a way to, we
got to win something, right? It's been way too long. We're championship city here. We got to win something.
And then you traded Brady away, and it all went downhill right after that.
Hey, we don't need any more curses. No. Let's not go there.
Also joining remotely, Mr. Ben Carr. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Matt. How's it going? Good to be with you guys again today. I'm liking the shirt. I'm wondering if that's just, you're trying to hopefully change the weather that we've been having from all the rain and storms, or if you're actually, feeling sunshine up there today.
It is sunshine in northern Texas today. Yeah, we got a lot of rain this weekend. So I wanted to, be a little more festive.
Nice.
Also joining us, Mr. Tyler Robinson from the great state of Idaho. How are you, Tyler?
Fantastic, Matt. Good to see you. Good to see all you guys. Happy Monday.
Oh, happy Monday. Security Weekly listeners, Identiverse is just a few weeks away. Register now and join the digital identity community at the Aria Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, May 30th to June 2nd. The 14th annual Identiverse will bring together over 2,500 security professionals for 4 days of world-class learning, engagement, and entertainment. As a community member, receive 20% off your Identiverse 2023 tickets using code IDV23-SW20. Register today at securityweekly.com/Identiverse 2023. This segment is sponsored by Varonis. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Varonis. Matt Radolec is Senior Director, Incident Response and Cloud Operations at Varonis. He leads a global team of security and cloud experts. His teams help organizations adopt a data-centric approach to securing data from the inside out. Matt, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thanks. It's great to have me here. I also had to mention I don't think a Bostonian has won the Boston Marathon in over a decade as well. So
it's
you
true.
guys do have a lot of
true.
winning that you have to make up for.
That and Tom Brady and the story of Boston. Sorry. All right. So Matt, I love this topic because I think I told you in our prep for this, I'm an app user data guy, right? I've been preaching this for years. I mean, it's been at least 8, maybe almost 9, where I've said at the end of the day, the CISO can control really 3 types of security control: the application, the users, and the data. Now, they might own the network. They might not own the network. They might own the endpoint. They might not own the endpoint. Like in cloud worlds, you never know what you own, but you own the applications, the users, and the data. And so I love this triad. And I think it starts, to me, the holy grail, the nirvana has always been protect the data, right? Because that's what attackers are after. Isn't it that simple? Just to protect the data.
Yeah, and you can't unbreach it, right? You can restore your network if it gets encrypted. You can restore from backups. You can build a new data center, but once your data gets out, you can't get it back. You can't unbreach data.
Yeah, and unstructured data is that treasure trove that so many organizations, we talk about, say easy, do hard. Containing unstructured data is do hard, because that's the hard act, right? I mean, in just full transparency, I was a Varonis client for a very, very long time. Varonis partner, actually, in a previous life, and used all of the Varonis product line to help secure our unstructured data. So I love the product line. I love what you guys are about, and I was looking forward to having you on the show today.
And it's not getting any easier, as organizations move data out to the cloud. And I think you said it really well, Matt, like apps, users, and data. That's almost all there is for a lot of organizations. I mean, how many of our viewers, our listeners could get to data without having to be on a corporately managed or owned device and not on a corporately owned or managed network? They can just get straight to those apps and to that data.
Exactly right, which is why I think it's such a critical topic for us to cover. Now, you wanted to wrap this in the concept of the blast radius. Now, I've heard this term used a couple different ways, from a data perspective, from a human perspective. What is the blast radius? Let's define blast radius first, Matt, and then kind of dig into why is it important to understand that, and then how do you protect it?
And if I could answer a third question that you didn't ask, which is how's that different from attack surface management? I'm gonna do that as well, if that's okay with you, Matt.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's
so first and foremost, like, what is it, right? It is the impact if any one thing on your network, user, device, even application, gets compromised. So from a data perspective, you could think about it as, what files and objects can you get to? Which applications can you log into and potentially export data from? I think about things like a Salesforce, which isn't really a unstructured data app, but it's definitely a place that an organization has a lot of critical information. I think about things like, databases, or even like your cloud platforms. All these places are, one user gets pumped, which is kind of the average thing that happens, right? We talk about, like, any one user, pull them out of their desk. How much can they access? Is it too much? The answer is most often yes. And that's a little bit different than when you think of attack surface management, which is defining all the things that can be attacked. What I like to do is take the spin of the blast radius. Okay, imagine if any one of those things was attacked, what would the impact be? That's your blast radius.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something that's top of mind right now. If an identity gets compromised, right? Obviously, they could pivot into maybe a cloud app or something like that. But what a lot of people aren't thinking about, a lot of organizations aren't thinking about, is folks can run reports out of these systems. We're finding so many clients that we're helping through incident response that they're like, my cloud app, my ERP system, my CRM system, it was not compromised. We know that, right? They did the forensics. But then you start doing scans of the unstructured data, and you find all this sensitive information because they were downloading reports. They were running reports that had things like social security numbers in them, things like bank accounts in them. So they're taking this cloud app and bringing information down, saving it on shares, saving it on their endpoints, and they have all of this sensitive data that's just been spawned across their entire network because they're running reports out of these systems. So organizations can't automatically think, no, I'm safe, I'm in the cloud, I know my cloud app wasn't breached. Well, what are your users doing with that data? Are they running reports? Are they saving them? Are they keeping them indefinitely? We found organizations that had 10 years worth of sensitive data in shares, right? And it's pretty scary if you're not thinking about it.
And that problem is only exponentially worse in platforms like Office 365. I think, one of the things that we typically see is probably the number one place where your kind of average user account compromise, phishing email, MFA fatigue, whatever, happens on a person's 365 account. The stuff that they can get to by default, the things that load up in their profile, the things that load up in their inbox, things that load up in the team sites that they have access to, there's probably enough data in there for a ransomware or, sometimes it's extortionware these days, actor to take that data out and say, hey, if you don't want me to post it online, you got to pay me a bunch of money. Or it could be detrimental to your business if someone gets in and leaks that information to your competitors. And people overlook this. They tend to think of all cyber attacks as these incredibly sophisticated things that leverage, a string of 0-day exploits or supply chain attacks, when in reality, a regular user can probably just get to too much stuff, which makes you highly susceptible to a data breach, whether or not you have good anti-malware defenses.
Yeah. And let's put it out there. It's not just active users. There are so many organizations who aren't pruning their user base. Like, they're not deactivating users. They're not getting rid of accounts. We were just working with a customer that had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stale accounts that were active. Right. And
the other side to that too is many organizations, not even just the stale accounts, but many organizations don't even understand or have a means to track what data has been compromised. There's the IR investigation, and as you go through that process, you realize the number of gaps and the inability of most modern environments to really have a grasp of what user data was compromised, much less what corporate data was compromised, and what impact that has long term, and how to begin the mitigation, not just from a technological standpoint, but a PR standpoint, a regulatory standpoint, a disclosure standpoint. All of those things becomes very difficult for most organizations. I think it's kind of lucky that ransomware happens to leak a lot of the information, because then people get an idea of what information they actually lost. Otherwise, they'd be in the dark for most things.
Well, that's a big problem when you're actually running an incident too, right? Is like, what was potentially compromised or exposed if it's an external actor and they're telling you, but trying to track down all the potential points and the things you may have missed, the data that's on the laptop that walked out the door, or where did that data get downloaded to a cloud service or a third party. It's really difficult to track and get a holistic sense for where all that information is, and that's what drives a lot of the time frame problem in an incident or a breach response, is trying to figure out what the blast radius is.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost as if someone's asking you, what was the blast radius, right?
Yeah. It's exactly what it is. And that's the challenge when you're the CISO sitting in the seat, is trying to figure out, how to give an assurance, to your internal stakeholders, but also to the regulators, and say, we know with assurance that this is the entirety of the information that we have to be concerned with. And the worst thing you can have as a CISO is to have that go public. You make an announcement either publicly or to a regulator, and then a day later, somebody goes, "Oh, we found this other thing." You're like, "Man, okay, now what do we do?" Right? Because you can't go back a third time. So it's really, really difficult to figure out how to contain and how to understand what that blast radius is.
And there's a lot of benefits to doing it ahead of an incident or before an incident instead of afterwards. I find like some of the best security leaders that are well tightly integrated into their businesses actually have this sense of like, where is my important and where's my sensitive data? They're the ones that tend to prioritize understanding the blast radius before an attack, because they see that like, hey, most of my organization's risk might actually exist in 2 or 3 business units that handle sensitive content or handle M&A or R&D type activity, where that's our intellectual property. Those are our crown jewels. And then you can focus your time and attention on securing those most valuable assets as well. There's a lot of tertiary benefits other than just the forensic aspect of understanding the blast radius before an attack.
No, I'll take it even further than that, Matt. It really goes a lot further than that, because when a business unit comes to you and says, we want to do X new thing, if you don't understand what the business unit's doing and you don't understand how they're using data and where that data is, it makes it really time consuming and hard to come back and give a risk assessment of like, what's the actual risk to the organization of them doing that, or lack of risk, right? And enable them to move quicker. So the more you know where that data is, the more you know how it's being used, the more you know what the context is. It's much more responsive and, I guess, timely to interact with the business and be seen as, you're actually contributing to the bottom line as opposed to being a detriment to it.
And Ben, who has access to it today? Because
correct.
I mean, there's so much permission sprawl, it's sickening, right? Where you're getting that current state of the crown jewels and who current state baseline who has access today, and should they have access? Should they not have access? Right. That's
your governance activity, right? I mean, you need to be doing the attestations and saying, okay, I know these 5 people have access now. Should they still have access tomorrow, right? Or on some type of regular schedule basis? Those attestations are critical, right? To make sure you're in compliance and you're doing good governance work.
And I think the other angle here is that this is not an impossible task, right? Like for any listener, this is great. There's no way I'm going to be able to figure out where my important and sensitive data is. I'm going to be able to empower someone with who has access to it today to actually tell me, like, no, Matt, that host from Security Weekly should not have access to the HR folder at this company that he doesn't work for. Why? How did he get this guest account, or who invited him to that folder? Like, this isn't that complicated, right? There is a lot of automation that's available. I mean, obviously Varonis can help with that, but there's a lot of steps that an organization can take to get this journey started to make it a lot easier for you. Should you have to answer that question? Okay, so we had this incident. Is it a breach?
Yeah. And that's where data stewards come in handy. I mean, this is something that I went through an exercise with Varonis on when we were doing an implementation of Varonis. Start identifying data stewards throughout the organization so they can have the input on what's sensitive, what needs to be confidential, how that security trimming needs to be put in place, right? So, using the tool, identify the data, get those data stewards in there to help you navigate all of that is very important.
I think it helps out from a security culture perspective as well. As we think about like wanting to engage those outside of IT or security, data is a great avenue for that, right? We're always talking about, well, we need to get the business involved in security. We need to make the average end user aware of the things that they're trying to secure. Well, if you tell them, hey, you actually have access to 1 million credit card numbers, some of which probably include yours, your family and friends' credit card numbers, and everyone that we do business with, all of a sudden they start to treat their role a little bit differently. But sometimes you have to tell people that. You have to let them know the kind of data that they have to handle and ask them to be a little bit more responsible with it. And that's that data-centric approach to cyber. That's where this helps out. You take that data-first strategy, help get people motivated about the thing that ultimately we're all trying to protect, right? Nobody breaks into a bank to steal the pens. They break in to take money. They break into an organization to steal their data. You got to focus your protection efforts on that, because especially as we start to think about like the perimeter eroding away. I'm not sure how many of our listeners, our viewers, think that they have this still kind of classic fortified, I can draw a box around it network, but I very, very rarely see those types of organizations anymore.
Yeah, agreed.
How do you think you get organizations started down that journey? Because you look at the M&A process, you look at the evolution of a 20-year-old environment and or the data that's come along with that over 20 years and or the need or ability for many of these companies to have to retain and move this data from different SaaS applications to different internal applications and keeping it secure and a handle on what is available. What do you think the process and or the mindset needs to be in order to get started on that journey? And then how do you think that organizations that are just getting going can do some of this without making some of the mistakes of the long-standing organizations?
Yeah, first of all, thank you. That's like a really awesome 2-part question. One, like, someone who's just getting started, where are they? And 2, someone who's just trying to get their arms around it, like, what can they do? What's practical, right? I think it's starting with a risk assessment. So first thing you absolutely have to do is figure out, all right, I know my company is X and we probably have some data on X, Y, and Z. Everybody has employee data that has employees, but like, what's the stuff that like makes your sausage or makes your juice, as I like to say? Where is that data stored? And if you can't figure it out on your own, bringing in someone from the outside to do a risk assessment is definitely an option. That's actually the starting point for every Varonis client or prospective client. The way we go to market is actually through data risk assessments. We offer a free service where we'll come in and take a look at some portion of your on-premise environment, of your cloud environments, and give you that understanding of where is your most critical and sensitive data and where is it the most at risk. And that's a great starting point for like realizing, wow, I actually have this obligation to protect millions and millions of records. I had no idea. Or even, some of the higher risk security findings that we'll see is things like, oh, wow, half your employees have, passwords stored in logon.xlsx spreadsheets in their home drives. So lateral movement just became easy. Attackers don't even need to get C2 on a box anymore when someone has a virtual post-it note with all their usernames and passwords on it. And so I'd say for both of those parties, start with a risk assessment, right? I'm very biased. I would want you to start with a Varonis risk assessment, but at the bare minimum, even you just inventorying where you think this stuff might be and what kind of data you think your company has is going to put you on that first step on that journey for you to understand, like, because with security practitioners, nobody has an unlimited time and unlimited resources. Where do you spend that finite time to get return? It should be where your most valuable data is.
How do you measure? Risk assessments are interesting, right? Low, medium, high. If we're using a qualitative method, but I mean, we know that they're only as good as kind of the inputs that go into those. Is there more of a quantitative way to measure the importance of that data and your blast radius? Because there's so many factors involved, Matt, right? Look, I was going to go down the path of, we haven't done a very good job of understanding our hardware and software assets. Do we really have a good handle on our data assets, which is related to all that, and all the interconnections of that data, right? So when I do it a basic assessment, if I do it on a qualitative basis, it might give me some focus areas to focus on. But then when you bring in all the intricacies of the interconnection of how you can gain access to data, doesn't that complicate the blast radius calculation and the risk assessment a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about like interconnectivity risk or third-party application risk. That only makes it more difficult. But if I could get us all to agree on one like very simple thing, and I invite you guys to have some discourse here, it's breach risk, right? Like, there are a lot of known regulations, and your organization, whether you feel like you need to be compliant with those regulations or not, might at some point be a processor of regulated data. And so at least being able to understand a qualitative perspective, cost of a data breach per record times the number of records that exist inside of an app, you can get to that low, medium, and high based on a theoretical fiduciary responsibility of that entire app or all of the data within it getting breached. And I think that it is just like a very simple place to start. You haven't even crossed into like your own intellectual property, which might be worth way more than your company than the cost of having to pay per record for a data breach. But if you're just scratching the surface, trying to figure out like where all that regulated data is, or what we call Varonis sensitive data, that can help you determine, and a little bit both quantitative and qualitative, what the net impact of a breach of that asset would be.
Yeah, I mean, you quantified it, right? Number of records, time cost per record breach. That's a quantitative model. Even Doug Hubbard said any quantitative model is better than a qualitative, and that could be just a simple X times Y equals Z, and that's what you just did. So.
Yeah, and if you want to get real advanced, you can start thinking about what your annual rate of occurrence is today. And you could do some forecasting. Maybe it's, once every couple of years you have an event like this and involves 10,000 records, and now you're putting dollar signs on it. Yeah. Next thing you know, you're using that as a justification to onboard some new data security platform.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who was a user of Varonis, right, the CIO of an organization that had 6,000 customers, as a user, not only were you able to go out and look at all of my data, but you're also able to give me classifications of that data. And then Varonis allowed me to monitor access at a baseline level to see who was accessing that data. So getting that level of visibility of, here's my risk when it comes to social security numbers, X amount, and here are the folks who are accessing all of that data. Then driver's license, right? That was another one. That was a big one, driver's license numbers. Any type of HIPAA data, right? You start classifying that data out. Now you can get in the realm of, all right, here's what the cost for this type of data would be if it were breached. Now you can start diving deeper and deeper and deeper. And then the other piece too was the monitoring of it. That was a huge benefit to see, baseline, who's accessing these data sets, who's accessing the sensitive data within my environment. Huge benefit. That visibility was key.
Matt, now that we have the risk assessment, we've got some qualitative or quantitative ways to measure it. I mean, is it simply just now focusing resources to go protect it? Is it that simple? Like, because it sounds simple, but sometimes it's not that simple.
Yeah, so it's really twofold. One, there's a lot that you can get today with automation. So Varonis uses a policy-based automated remediation, or what we call autonomous remediation. Or we can take something like the walls that an organization wants to put in place. No one should have access to more than this many records, or this many records of a certain sensitive data type can't be exposed externally. And the Varonis robots can keep those policies enforced for you. So in some ways, the effort from you is in the design of those policies or the orchestration of those policies, and then you leave the engineering up to a software platform like Varonis. So it can be really, really easy to get that inventory, have that visibility, and start to reduce that blast radius. And I think for those that might be kind of like listening today and thinking like, I can do that, like I can do those things. Maybe they're even already a client and they're starting to think about where that next thing is. I always say is to move from the regulated data to the business sensitive data, because you're going to get some ears perking up in the boardroom when you do that. I think of all of our manufacturing clients where either the way that they make things is in the actual manufacturing process itself, or the formulas, the ingredients of what they make are what give them their competitive edge. Or even in the way that it's packaged or processed. I think of things like law firms, right? Like, not every client's going to give you sensitive data, but some are going to give you really, really sensitive stuff. They might be a very, very high value client to you. You can find out where your business critical data is that next step. And then you're going to really start to see like how much of a more fluent security leader you can be with business leaders when you start to speak in that language.
See, it's not that hard at the end of the day, now is it? It's easy to protect your data. Start with a risk assessment, understand qualitatively and quantitatively where your most sensitive data is, and start to put policies in place to protect it. I mean, done. We just solved it.
If it were only that easy. But no, Matt's absolutely right. It allows you to have the business conversation with business unit leaders. That's the key, right? It helps strengthen that relationship across the business, because now you have visibility into where the most sensitive information in your business is. Now you can go back to that leader and start talking about who needs access to this when, here's the risk it's bringing to the organization, and now you engage them in helping you control that, helping you protect it. Now they're embedded in the security conversation, in the risk conversation.
Yeah, they understand that you're not just reading their email all the time. They're starting to think like, wow, this person's like actually trying to help my business unit keep doing what it's doing, keep making money. Or if you're a hospital, delivering patient care, right? Like you end up feeling this sense of empowerment, and people want to work with you because you've now quantified for them, hey, you got 100 employees that can access all this stuff. Like, do you really need 100 people to be able to get to the secret recipe for our soft drink?
And I think there's some benefits too, adjacent benefits, right? It helps me start to identify where my critical key partners are, where my data is, right? It's maybe all stored in a cloud provider that I have a high concentration on. It overlaps into other protection areas as well, but it starts with where is the data, how sensitive is it, and how do I protect it? And without understanding those basic things, that's why I think asset management is so important for organizations. You can't protect what you don't know. So figure out what you have and then figure out how to go protect.
Yeah, and that's why it's the first control in the CIS top 20, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you completed my thought on that, Matt, was, it really goes back to what you referenced earlier of asset management, right? This is just another asset classification category, right? Where data is just an asset that you have to look at, like, what's the value of that asset to the organization? What's the value of losing that asset to the organization, right? And if you don't understand that asset in its entirety, how it interplays with all the other assets in the organization, there's no way you can protect it. So, I mean, I think it's uber important to understand that in the relationships.
And it's only getting tougher. Introducing these new technologies like AI, who can go through and scan all of your data and use it in its data set, use it in its training models. Well, should it be?
And should you allow it to be, right?
Like, should it be? That's the question.
Or do you need to keep it out of that data set?
So it's only going to get more complicated now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think interconnectivity risk is going to drive that a lot too, right? We're only going to become, our apps are only going to talk to each other more. Our business leaders are only going to have the ability to sign up new apps and share data with new places. I think that's going to happen far more frequently in the future than it does now, and we're never going to be able to undo that the progress or the pace of innovation that's happening.
Yeah, we started this segment by trying to define the difference between attack surface monitoring and kind of discovery and the blast radius. And what I think is important is understanding where the data is to identify when somebody gets in, because they will get in. Look, it's inevitable. We see this all the time, right? The human compromise is real. And understanding where data is and how to gain access to it and prevent it and protect it is a huge part that the attack surface monitoring doesn't do, because it's just telling you, like, these are the systems I can gain access to, not thinking about the human element at all. So I think this is something that's very important for people to get their arms around, because now I can start to prioritize resources, budget, dollar, people, whatever, to actually figure out how to protect data where it's at. Matt, any final thoughts on that?
No, that was so eloquently stated, Matt. I think I would just want to reiterate the point that if you're listening to all this and you just you don't even know where to start, risk assessment, like a free risk assessment from Varonis, can definitely help you out with that. There's no obligation to move forward with that, and it will give you this snapshot of wow, I actually have some really important data that I should shift some resources to try to protect.
Yes, absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Yeah, it was an honor to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
To learn how to limit your blast radius, please visit securityweekly.com/Varonis. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.